What's up, everybody? Welcome back to White Sox Daily once again. Got a little bit more news today than we have here in recent days. A couple of news stories have broken here over the last couple of hours. It's been a bit of a slow news cycle as of recently, especially with Thanksgiving kind of over last week. Not a great deal happening in the world of baseball, and especially with the White Sox. Had some Pope gifts here and there, but we finally got some more concrete rumors, speculation, and major targets for Chicago, and we'll get right into it. Starting off, of course, we talked about some of the big speculation, some of the big rumors. We've got one of the bigger names finally coming through as MLB insider Mark Feinsand. Released an article recently where he was talking about the perfect free agent match for all 30 teams, and the Chicago White Sox linked to Adolis Garcia, also reporting that there has already been some mutual interest between the two. They'll be conducting some meetings coming up shortly. But yeah, I mean, you want to talk about a perfect Chicago White Sox fit, a guy who was really solid about 3 years ago and has been slowly kind of petering down the drain a little bit these last 2 years, well past his prime. He's 33 at the beginning of this season, but a guy with a big name. So what could be more Chicago White Sox than that? Being a little bit of a dick here, but I mean, yeah, Adolis Garcia, a guy that linked to the Chicago White Sox. You might be able to get him for a little bit cheaper than he would have been in some previous seasons had his contract been up before this year. Like I said, he will be 33 by the time the season begins. He spent the last 6 seasons in Texas playing for the Rangers. He was originally traded there from St. Louis. Had a really, really solid championship run there in 2023 with Texas. Big power hitter for them. A guy that was just crushing the baseball through that season. 39 home runs. Just has not looked the same, though, since. Obviously, the Texas Rangers as a whole team really haven't looked the same since then, but a guy who dropped his OPS from 800 that year down to 684 and then dropped it once again to 665 last year. Ended up just continuously having fewer and fewer power numbers, just 14 fewer home runs there on the drop-off. He also hit his all-time career low last season with just 19 homers, which still would have been up there for the Chicago White Sox, though, to be entirely fair. So we'll throw that out there right off the bat. I mean, obviously he would have a place with the White Sox should they go down that route, go after a veteran like Garcia. You can throw him right into the outfield. He'll be starting day one. He'll be a guy that, like I just mentioned, sadly enough, will probably be in the top 3 for the team as far as home runs this coming season, should you make that particular move. He's a guy that probably going to make a substantially smaller amount on this upcoming contract. Right now, projected to sign for up to $13 million less than his contract last year, just based on those statistics and those power numbers dropping as vastly as they have. But a guy who obviously has a past. I mean, just 2 years of downward play. He could bounce back. Obviously, that's something that any player is capable of at any given time. I mean, it's not like he's 43, right? I mean, 33 years old. We've seen baseball players play well into their prime, even longer than that. And he's a guy that hits over 300 in the postseason, a guy with 8 home runs in one singular postseason run back in 2023. Not that far removed from it. Could be a major swing for the Chicago White Sox if that's the direction they want to go. And a guy that, like we said, likely to command a little bit less money than some of the other big major name signings that are out there free agency-wise for the Chicago White Sox. We're going to move right along, though, to a story that broke earlier today about newly acquired infielder Tanner Murray, a prospect that Chicago is very keen in on. A guy that brings a lot of versatility potentially to the Chicago White Sox, who have an infield that has so much flux to it already. Obviously, it feels like we're bringing this up in every video. Colston Montgomery, you got Chase Maedroth, you got Lenyn Sosa, you got Miguel Vargas. What do you do with everybody? Where does everybody play is another question amongst those guys. You feel a little bit good about probably Montgomery's at shortstop, but even then, There's talks about moving him to third base, and it just gets messy. And then as a guy to just throw in there, just for the fun of it, I guess, just to see how much chaos you can create, they acquired Tanner Murphy via trade earlier on this offseason. He's been a guy that has played extremely well in the minor leagues thus far, has yet to make his major league debut, but a guy who has played many positions, worn many hats as he has traveled through the minor league systems to this point. He's a guy that Tampa Bay liked and didn't really want to see go, but obviously the Chicago White Sox able to acquire him and multiple other players in the trade earlier on this offseason. He's a guy that played a little bit of outfield. He played shortstop, third base, played some second base even, not as much, but usually playing over on shortstop, third base side, but he's a guy that also played about 20% of the time in the minor leagues in the outfield. He's a guy you can pretty much plug and play right there. If we're looking for Adolis Garcia too, he's a guy that might be able to climb up and maybe even make the major league roster this coming season. He's 26 years old. He's got experience, plenty of it now down in the minor leagues. Could be just about ready for that big call up coming up. And the White Sox, Chris Getz, talking about how important he felt that acquisition was in a press conference earlier today, talking about his versatility and what that can bring to the White Sox. So yeah, let us know how you feel about bringing in yet another versatile infielder potentially. Could we be seeing Tanner Murphy up in the major leagues this coming season, or is it still a few years down the road? Let us know in the comments below, and we'll move right on along as we've got this story from Luis Robert talking about a really old school Cuban national rule regarding their national baseball team that back in 2023, the World Baseball Classic took place. It was excellent. I think a lot of people that weren't even particularly huge baseball fans really came to the baseball scene and took part in the viewership that preseason there for Major League Baseball to kind of get a glimpse of what Team USA was doing, how the rest of the countries were panning out. Obviously, Team Japan beating us by 1 run there in that excellent final game for the championship. But Team Cuba was a semifinalist, in large part thanks to a pair of White Sox that were on that team in Luis Robert and Yoan Moncada. Obviously, 4 major league players did play for the team, which actually they needed special permission to do, as Cuba has very strict restrictions going all the way back to the Fidel Castro regime in Cuba in regards to ball players leaving the country. Originally, the law was that if you left Cuba to go play professional sports in another country, you were branded a traitor. You were not allowed back to the island. It was highly illegal, and to a certain extent, I mean, the law didn't really get dissolved at any point. They're less strict about it. But yeah, as we mentioned, 4 players that were major league players 2 years ago when the World Baseball Classic took place had to get special written permission just to participate for Team Cuba because they had gone to the major leagues, played in the United States, and that was a no-no back home. And Luis Robert says this go around, not doing it. He said until that law gets officially changed and there's no more special permissions needed, no more begging and pleading just to be able to play and go seek a better life for yourself, go play in the major leagues, make the money that you deserve as this big-time ball player that some of these guys are. Luis Robert says he's not going to return to Team Cuba, not going to play for him until that rule gets rescinded. And so, yeah, big story there is Luis Robert potentially going to be missing from Team Cuba's ball club. We'll see if any other players follow suit with Luis Robert's demands of the Cuban government in that regard, if Team Cuba will allow major league players with absolutely no special permissions needed or no restrictions going forward. Obviously, Luis Robert, one of the big-time names on that Team Cuba roster that they would have been otherwise expecting. So we'll see if maybe his voice stepping in there creates some changes as far as the Team Cuba is concerned heading into the next World Baseball Classic. And we'll wrap things up with a look ahead into what's coming up with free agency here. Obviously, we've heard a lot of stories about, Luis Arraez was a name that was, sent around as a guy that might come to the Chicago White Sox, talking about a lot of pitching acquisitions. Chris Getz even basically just flat out saying one of their big needs was going to be relief arms that could eat up innings. But what about power bats? The Athletic posting an article earlier on today in regards to that the Chicago White Sox, whatever their current plans are, should they just scrap it, toss it in the trash, and focus all in on getting some power into this lineup, because that is truly a mark of weakness for the Chicago White. Lenyn Sosa, with low 20s, ended up leading the team in home runs last year. Colston Montgomery probably projected to be the home run leader this upcoming season, but I mean, obviously that was a huge weakness for the White Sox last year. The Southsiders were not bombing last year at the rate, or anywhere for that matter, just not a big time prolific home run hitting team. And even though that's usually going to cost a chunk of change, is that something that maybe the Chicago White Sox should flip their strategy a little bit here and start going all in on, no more of these rumors about Luis Ariz? Detach yourself from that stuff. Detach yourself from these contact guys. You've got some of that already. You've got some relievers in the building now that probably can already be inning eaters for you as you develop some of your young pitchers. Would you like to see the Chicago White Sox make at least one big swing on a power bat, particularly maybe at first or third base? Let us know in the comment section below, and we'll see you guys tomorrow. Until then, I've been Aaron Feely. This has been White Sox Daily.